Hello, class. Mr. Fino here. This is Unit 5, Lesson 4 on the achievements of the Gupta Empire. In this lesson, you will learn why the period during the Gupta Empire is known as a golden age. Now, the term golden age, it could refer to gold. I mean, it could refer to them having gold, but beyond that, it just means it's a period of peace and prosperity where, I'll get more detail on that in a second, but here's a map of the Gupta Empire in northern India around 450. So our first question is, what happened before the Gupta Empire? And the answer to that is there. Well, long before that, there was the Mauryan Empire, which was when India was first unified, right, brought together under one ruler. And we learned a little bit about Ashoka, who was the most famous ruler of the Mauryan Empire. And here's a picture of him on the right with a pretty sweet mustache. But yeah, there was probably a little bit of period of instability and infighting between the Mauryan Empire and the Gupta Empire, but that's what happened before. And you can actually see the Mauryan Empire was massive. It looks like land-wise, it was even bigger than the Gupta Empire. So that question I was talking about earlier, what is a golden age? So a golden age is a period of peace and prosperity. Peace meaning no war or limited war, and prosperity meaning they have a lot of things, a lot of money, a lot of wealth. For this to happen, all basic needs are being met. So people don't need to worry about food, shelter, and safety. And having those basic needs met allows them to focus on other things like the arts and sciences. And so the Gupta Empire that we're looking at in this section was a golden age. All right, so the beginnings of the Gupta Empire. So the Gupta Empire began under Chandragupta I, who we see here on the left. Again, another nice mustache, and he's holding a hawk. That's pretty cool. And during the Gupta Empire, they ruled most of northern India, which we saw on that map a few slides ago. Chandragupta and the subsequent rulers of the Gupta Empire arranged marriages between their family and the sons and daughters of other rulers, right? So they said, oh, I've got a son. This province over here has a daughter. Let's, arrange a marriage between them and forge an alliance, right? So this idea of an arranged marriage being used to forge alliances with other groups and pretty much accumulate power, right? Helps with warfare, helps with politics. What was the government like in the Gupta Empire? So the Guptas set up a strong central government, which means they operate out of one place and one government with a council of advisors to help make decisions. Unlike the Mauryan Empire before it, the Guptas gave local areas a great deal of independence. So I guess during the Mauryan Empire, they tried to control as much as they could. But under the Guptas, they divided up the kingdom into provinces, which is different sort of like states, which were ruled by royal governors. So this idea of independence, meant that the government didn't have to do quite so much. They just kind of divvied up responsibilities amongst their different provinces. So that makes me kind of think of, like, if you're looking here on the right, the map, this is Alameda County. This is where we live. And we have different cities that all kind of control themselves, right? It's kind of the same idea. And the Gupta Empire lasted nearly 230 years. All right, so now let's talk about some of the achievements, starting with universities. The Guptas built many colleges and universities, both Hindu and Buddhist. All right, so that would be any university would probably have an emphasis on one or the other. Universities provided religious training in those, Hinduism and Buddhism, and classes in mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, and Sanskrit, right, which is the ancient language of India. Students could also study sculpture, painting, music, and dance, so different forms of art. And then there were medical students who learned how to be doctors, and medical students learned how to ask patients questions about their physical problems, for diagnosis to figure out, what's wrong with people. They made cures from bark, roots, leaves, and minerals, right? Natural things out in the world. And this is pretty cool. Surgeries were performed with the front claws of giant ants, like you see here. Um, Quite sharp, we do some damage. And then this picture here is a famous was a famous university in India. Next, we have literature. So Gupta writers wrote poetry, fables, and folk tales. They wrote plays, which could be comedies, dramas, historical or political. The Mahabharata was a poem which was composed or written over hundreds of years, and sometimes passed orally, right through storytelling. And the general theme of it was showing the battle between good and evil. The Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata and is a beloved work of Hinduism. I believe this picture on the top is a scene from the Bhagavad Gita. And then many of us have seen the movie Aladdin, either the animated movie or the live action, but that comes from a famous Arabian tale about Aladdin and his magic lamp. And this was inspired by a Gupta folktale. So that's pretty cool knowing that. They had achievements in painting. So painting was important to wealthy and noble families. It wouldn't have been important to the poorer people because they wouldn't have had access to it. Some of the important themes of paintings were deities, right, gods, religious topics, and noble living, right, showing the luxuries of being a noble. Ajanta is probably the most famous group of Indian paintings, and these can be found on the walls of 30 caves and show scenes from the Buddha's life, in addition to other scenes like kings, queens, scenes of nature. Here we have some pictures of the cave, the Ajanta caves, and the art within. Here's an entrance, and then here's some of the artwork itself. You can see it's very colorful, and yeah, very a majestic sort of setup. Next, we have sculptures. So sculptors worked with stone, wood, bronze, and terracotta clay. Many of the statues portrayed the Buddha and Hindu deities, right, gods again. And then Gupta sculptures portray the human form simply and gracefully. They focus on like very neat lines, and you can see that in these two sculptures here. There were achievements in metalwork. So Gupta kings controlled huge mines of gold, copper, and iron. So with access to these metals, metal workers made gold and copper coins, engraving them with Gupta rulers, showing some of their actions. And then they were also famous for their iron working with iron. And then here we have a couple pictures of an iron pillar that stands in India, 25 feet tall, weighs 13,000 pounds, and it is engraved with the story of a Gupta emperor. And what's really cool about this pillar is it has not rusted after 1,600 years. It's rain and all the elements, it hasn't rusted. So scientists and metal workers they don't know exactly how metal workers of ancient India were able to do this. So there were achievements in mathematics. So Hindu mathematicians created a way of writing whole numbers with numerals 1 through 9. Hindu mathematicians were the first to treat 0 as a number. And later, Arab peoples learned the Indian system and brought it to Europe, which became known as Hindu Arabic numerals. And the important thing to know is we use all this still today. We use their decimal system. Again, we use 0. We use the numeral system, which you can see here. Right, we see how it looks in Europe versus these other languages, but the ideas are the same. Also, within mathematics, Aryabhata combined mathematics and astronomy to make some key discoveries. So one of those discoveries was he figured out a year was exactly 365.258 days long. He calculated the size of the Earth and proposed that planets were spheres. He hypothesized that Earth was on an axis, right, rotating on an axis. And within ancient India, mathematics was also used to design complex structures like you see here on the right. This is a pretty cool picture of this figure. And then roads. So Gupta rulers encouraged trade by creating a system of well-built roads. So the system for actually creating the roads was they cleared the roadway of plants, trees, and rocks, like you see here on the left, filled in the holes so it was nice and flat, then smoothed the ground until it was level. Um, Actually, the roads were raised. And they were designed for safety and comfort. So ditches, like you see here on the left here, or canals ran along both sides to prevent flooding. This is a modern day road, but the same idea. Um, Signs are put up along the way to show travelers how far they'd gone, like you see here in the center. Rest houses gave people someplace to rest and spend the night, which was beneficial for travelers. And then wells provided water for both drinking and cooking. This is a massive well in India today. It's not, they'd be smaller, but same idea. And then traders could easily deliver goods using these roads and then waterways that were kind of connected to the roads. All right, so in this lesson, you learned why the period during the Gupta Empire is known as a golden age. All right, thank you.